Election day is just 8 days away, and that's close. And if you're still wondering on who you're going to vote for, then this video is very much going to help you make that decision, because I will be going over 7 different policy points and how each candidate falls in what they believe on those issues. So this is really just about getting you facts. Especially in our information age, things can get lost in viral videos and just through the talking points of the political party, and the founders didn't really want that to be the case in presidential elections. They wanted voters to be well informed. It wasn't supposed to be about political parties. It wasn't supposed to be about any of this extra stuff. It was simply supposed to be about which person that you believed was going to be the best fit for the office. So hopefully by going over these policy points, it'll help give you a clearer picture of each candidate and maybe help you make a decision. So don't go anywhere. We will discuss all of that right here. I'm Ben Leach, and this is The Ben Leach Show. Before we begin our video, I would like to give a shout out to my sister-in-law, Leach, who signed in and made a comment on my YouTube video. Thank you so much for doing that. She really posed a really great question. If you hadn't seen it, you might want to check it out in the comments about proportional representation and how that might actually reinforce a national popular vote candidate. And that was a really great question. So thank you for your support and thank you for your engagement. I really appreciate that. So let's dive right into it. Today I'm going to be talking about 7 different policy positions and how each candidate has taken a stance on that issue. Now, like I said in the very beginning of this video, I could spend hours and hours talking about what each candidate believes about a given issue, but I'm here to give you just a summary so that way you will be a little bit better informed if you're going to the polls in 8 days to cast your ballot for the next president. So the topics that I will discuss are as follows. I will start with the coronavirus, then I'll go into climate, then I will move into the economy, and then healthcare, and then I will talk about foreign policy, law enforcement and guns, and then I will end with their view on the courts. So these are 7 different very important issues that a lot of voters have on their minds, and perhaps you have a couple of questions on which each candidate believes on that issue. So let's begin with the coronavirus. So the coronavirus is something that has obviously affected everyone in the world. It certainly has affected you and I and how we operate our daily lives. And it's something that is present on a lot of voters' minds coming into the election, and how the Trump administration was able to handle the pandemic versus how the public perceives that the Biden administration could potentially handle the pandemic is something that is very worthwhile to look at. Public polling shows that more people support Joe Biden and his ability to potentially handle a pandemic. But Trump and Biden's policies are pretty similar as far as their claims to want to get a vaccine and mobilize PPE development and distribution. That's what the Trump administration had already been doing. They had mobilized a lot of PPE as well as created ventilators to be distributed to hospitals and other regions across not only our country, but a lot of other countries across the world as well. He also oversaw Operation Warp Speed, which was the operation to create a viable candidate for a vaccine to the coronavirus. He thinks that we have rounded a corner and we are pretty close to having a real candidate for that vaccine, which would be then distributed by the military to get it out as quickly as possible to various regions of the country and get that into the hands of healthcare providers to then start using to help build some immunity to the virus. Now, Joe Biden also has a similar view. He wants to mobilize PPE. He wants to make sure that people have enough ventilators, as well as also develop a vaccine that would be viable enough to make sure that we build an immunity to the virus. The main difference with him, however, is that he has been more vocal about being pro-masks. He wants to see mask mandates on federal property, as well as encouraging all of the governors to impose mask mandates within their state. So that's really the main difference between the two candidates when it comes to coronavirus. The next topic that we will be talking about policy-wise is climate. It's something that is very important to some voters, as well as an area of policy where Trump and Biden are taking very different approaches to that policy issue. So President Trump has really focused in on the fact that as far as energy goes, he would like to see oil and gas production and development expand over the next 4 years. He's very proud of the fact that we've become energy independent, so that meaning that we are much less dependent than on any other countries when it comes to our own oil and gas production, which is why gas prices have been so low. He doesn't really have as much investment centered focus on renewable sources of energy, and aside of the fact that America is not as large of a contributor to CO2 emissions as some countries like China and India, which account for a far larger percentage of carbon emissions than America does, which is why he has removed America from the Paris Climate Accords that they got into under the Obama administration. And he would seek to just continue what we were doing under the past 4 years, with the energy independence being one of the top priorities for the American economy to continue to boom and more jobs to continue to be grown. Under the Biden administration, he would see that we immediately rejoin the Paris Climate Accord that we joined under the Obama administration. He would also see that we become a renewable source of energy. We would be focused on renewable sources of energy, and we get to net zero carbon emissions by 2050, which is a very ambitious goal, but he thinks that that is a worthwhile avenue to pursue, saying that he would invest $1 trillion into the development of technologies that would go to support solar and wind as the future of these sources that could potentially get rid and lower our carbon emission rates in the future. Now, the third area that we are going to examine is the economy. And this is one of those areas where people overwhelmingly support Trump's ability to handle the economy. Under his administration, we had seen the best numbers as far as the stock market goes and as far as record low unemployment rates. That obviously changed with the coronavirus, and so Trump and his campaign has promised to reinvigorate the American economy. He has vowed that he will create 10 million new jobs within 10 months, as well as introduce 1 million new small businesses. He wants to further cut taxes. He wants to give tax incentives to businesses that keep their jobs in America, as a way to mitigate any businesses that would seek to leave America and put up other jobs overseas. So he wants to see America keep as many jobs as possible and grow just as well as it was growing the previous 3 years. Now, Biden's approach to the economy is very different, obviously, than Trump's. He has said multiple times that he would like to cut the Trump tax cuts that he put in place, and instead actually raise the marginal tax rates and income tax for wealthy individuals. Anyone making over $400,000 would be taxed more than the current tax bracket that they are in right now, and then it would go up based on how much more you make than that. He also would want to see capital gains and dividends taxed at the same rate that the income tax is at right now. So both of those things would raise taxes significantly and could potentially affect middle-class people. Even if the taxes aren't necessarily targeted at them, they would see the effects of those if they had any investments, or just if they are working for a large corporation, which would then potentially have to cut back on their employees or cut back on the prices that they charge for various goods and services. So that is really the main two approaches. Biden wants to increase taxes in order to fund more public services. He sees this as an overall good so that we aren't increasing our deficit and instead are coming up with money for social and new programs based on the amount of tax that we are getting off of wealthy Americans that he sees as their ability to pay their fair share in order for everyone to really get the most out of these public services that he's proposing. Speaking of public services, our next issue that we are talking about is healthcare. It's something that is very sensitive to a lot of voters and something that a lot of people focus on. Really, year after year in elections, they are very conscious about if they have private insurance or if they want to have more public insurance and state-sponsored insurance, that this is something that's very important to them. So under the Biden administration, he proposes a protection and expansion of the current Affordable Care Act that we know as Obamacare. You've probably heard Obamacare more than the Affordable Care Act, or ACA. He would seek to expand that. He calls it Biden Care, basically just adding a public option which would allow individuals to opt into a public health care option that is similar to Medicaid. And he would also want to expand the Medicaid program and allow other individuals who aren't necessarily able to join a private health care to be able to opt into a program similar to Medicaid. So that is his big proposal. Now, Trump, on the other hand, doesn't like the current ACA as it is and has really been seeking, especially right now, to get rid of the Obamacare and implement something that's new. He says that he would still want to protect pre-existing conditions. That is a really big concern for a lot of people who currently are enrolled in the Obamacare system, to have protection against pre-existing conditions. He said that he would keep that, but he would make it better in some way. Although a plan really hasn't been formed, but he says that whatever plan that he would put in place would have overwhelming support by his party and the Democratic Party. But I guess we will see what that option is. But really, both candidates, when it comes to healthcare, want to make sure that pre-existing conditions are protected, and will have at least some sort of, I guess, national healthcare plan, with Biden's being a little bit more ambitious in terms of socialized medicine, having a lot more people probably ending up on the public option. Now, another area where voters don't necessarily pay as close attention, but certainly is very important if you're trying to get reliable information, something to focus on, is their foreign policy. And this is something where Trump likes to tout his successes that he's had in the past 4 years with building relations with countries that we previously had not had close relations to, as well as being able to broker peace deals between Israel and Middle Eastern countries that have historically been hostile to Israel. So that is something that Trump is very proud of, and would seek to expand peace in the Middle East to even more countries than were in the original peace deal that he was able to broker very recently. He also wants to make sure that we are getting a fair deal. So his idea is America first, which is how he evaluates a lot of our foreign deals that we are entangled in right now, seeing it through the lens of, is America getting its fair share? So making sure that they are paying just as much as America is paying, and that Americans and their tax money is not going unevenly to programs where other countries are not heavily invested in. Now, Biden has been critical of this and has said that his America First policy has actually damaged our relationships with our allies. So his foreign policy is basically to bolster our allies and make sure that the relationships that we have with them are strengthened, and to put America back into international agreements in order to form international coalitions instead of having unilateral actions against certain countries. Like China, we have current tariffs on them. He would seek to repeal those and instead form an international coalition with many different countries to then put pressure on China and their unfair trade deals and their unfair trade practices. So that is really their difference between those two candidates when it comes to foreign policy, something that is very important for people to know what each candidate believes in. Now, something else that has been very relevant, especially in 2020, we have gotten a lot of focus on law enforcement as well as guns, and the policy of the two individuals is also very different from one another. Now, Joe Biden has said multiple times that he believes that the police are systemically racist, meaning that it is ingrained in just the behaviors and the training that is given to police officers to target different races at a disparate rate. So he would seek to reform that. He would seek to ban chokeholds and ban different practices that the police are using right now to, in his mind, seek to change the racial disparities that people are seeing and that they have been protesting over in 2020. And as far as guns go, he would seek to ban all assault-style weapons, as well as expand universal background checks, making it a little bit harder to receive firearms, and potentially only allowing one gun to be purchased per person per month. So that is just some of his proposals. Now, Trump, on the other hand, has been a staunch defender of law enforcement. He has said that he does not believe that the police are systemically racist and that there are instances of police misconduct that need to be handled, so he would do more research and funding into better police practices. But he has said that he would actually seek to reform criminal justice like he has been doing, as well as protecting law enforcement and increasing penalties for anyone that assaults police officers. As far as guns go, he's always been a defender of the Second Amendment under his administration and would not seek to restrict firearm purchases or anything of that sort, so he doesn't have anything as far as restricting your guns. So the last topic that we are going to be talking about is something that has gotten a lot more attention in the recent weeks due to just how close we are to Election Day, which is courts. So Judge Amy Coney Barrett has recently been put up for nomination on the Supreme Court to replace the late Justice Ginsburg. She passed away, and so that seat had remained open very recently, and so currently there are 8 justices on the Supreme Court, and with this election looking like it could go to the Supreme Court for many decisions if any states were contested, which could very well happen. It happened in 2000, and so he thinks that having another justice on the Supreme Court is very important, especially in a contested election. So he has put forth Amy Coney Barrett. He has also, under his administration, made it a pledge to appoint very conservative judges and judges that are very much originalist, meaning that they interpret the Constitution as it was written, and they tend not to legislate from the bench or put any of their own interpretation or their own personal feeling into law or into their interpretation of their cases that they see. Now, Joe Biden has been kind of reluctant to say his stance on courts. He, in the past, has said that he is against packing the court. But very recently he has said that he could be open to judicial reform in the form of court packing or court rebalancing, as some of in his campaign and in his party have said, just making sure that in his mind that the court is balanced, not leaning one way or the other, which in my opinion would probably lean toward having more justices on the Supreme Court if you're trying to balance that out. The controversy surrounding that is that we've had 9 justices for the past 150 years, so that is a pretty big move in some people's eyes. But basically they have 2 different views as far as appointing judges, especially this recent Supreme Court justice nomination, being that President Trump has the constitutional right to appoint justices all the way up to the end of his 4th term, whereas Joe Biden believes that the person who will win the presidency should have the ultimate say in appointing the new Supreme Court justice. So that is just a brief summary of 7 different political topics and policies and what each candidate believes on each topic. Now, I know I didn't spend a ton of time talking about in-depth policy positions because I don't want you to get lost in the weeds. I would heavily recommend, though, that you don't stop your education here, that you continue to look at each candidate as a whole. You look at their individual policy positions and their proposals, as well as other factors that contribute to what would make them the better person to fit the role of our president, because this is something that is very important. Also, your Senate and representatives that you can vote for are also very important, because all of this ties into the balance of power that we have under our 3 branches of government. And so this election will really determine how different legislation in the future will be able to be posed if they have the Democratic majority in the House, Senate, and presidency, the Democratic Party would have considerable power. But if the Republicans were able to hold on to the presidency and the Senate, it could look very different than it would under the former. So you're just going to have to decide for yourself who you believe is the best person for the job. And hopefully by watching this video, you have at least learned a little bit more than you knew previously about what they believe in their policy positions. If you enjoyed this video, if you learned something at all, please like this video, consider subscribing to my channel, and share this video with your friends and family. It's something that's super important for people to learn, especially before Election Day, what the candidates believe. And there you have it. In our next video on Thursday, I will be breaking down mail-in ballots, why there is a controversy surrounding them, and what it might mean for the results of our election, and how we might not actually get a winner come November. So stay tuned for that. And like always, thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of your morning, afternoon, or evening, or whenever you're watching this video. Thank you so much. I'm Ben Leach. Have a great day.